14 days and no end in sight. The US President Donald Trump says he's prepared to keep the government closed for a year or more. This as he stands firm on his demand for billions of dollars to fund a US-Mexico border wall. President Emmanuel Macron vows to continue reforming France. This as the country braces itself for the 8th consecutive weekend of anti-government protests dubbed the Yellow Vest Movement. And tropical storm Pabuk lashes southern Thailand with heavy rain, wind and surging seawater. Airports are closed, ferry services have been suspended, leaving thousands of tourists stranded. Hello and welcome. You're watching France 24. I'm Rochelle Ferguson-Biahi with the headlines for you this hour. The US President Donald Trump has told congressional leaders he's prepared to keep the government closed for a year or more. This as he stands firm on his requests for funding for a US-Mexico border wall. Well, Trump has refused to sign any budget that doesn't include funding for the southern barrier. This despite the partial government shutdown entering its third week. Sanam Chantier has details.
Emerging from lengthy combative talks with Donald Trump only to announce no deal was struck. And so a partial government shutdown grinds on in Washington, entering its third week.
We told the president we needed the government open. He resisted. In fact, he said he'd keep the government closed for a very long period of time, months or even years.
On Friday, senior Democrats battled the US president in the White House Situation Room over his request for $5.6 billion to fund the wall along the border with Mexico, which he promised during his campaign. This at a time when illegal border crossings are at historic lows. For his part, the Republican president has threatened to take a controversial step.
We could call a national emergency and build it very quickly. And it's another way of doing it. But if we can do it through a negotiated process, we're giving that a shot.
Administration officials led by Vice President Mike Pence are meeting over the weekend to try to end the deadlock. But a quick solution does not appear to be in sight as Democrats are in no mood to make concessions to Trump. Meanwhile, more than 800,000 across the US are paying the price for the impasse, with some on unpaid leave and others working without pay.
In other world news, President Emmanuel Macron has pledged to forge ahead with reforming France. This as the country braces itself for the 8th consecutive weekend of Yellow Vest protests. Following Macron's first cabinet meeting of the year on Friday, government spokesman Benjamin Griveaux hinted there could be more changes to come concerning France's pensions and unemployment systems. Well, Griveaux also urged French people to have their say during upcoming national debates instead of protesting. Have a listen.
We provided a quick and genuine response to the legitimate demands of the so-called Yellow Vest movement, most notably in terms of increasing purchasing power. Since these announcements were made, the so-called Yellow Vests that remain are now just agitators who seek an insurrection and ultimately to overthrow the government.
Well, Saturday's protest will be key in determining the way forward for the Yellow Vest movement at the start of 2019. A recent survey showed that 55% of French people polled think the demonstrations should carry on. Yellow Vest protests rocked France at the end of 2018, but some say they now fear the movement could be losing steam. François Wibo reports.
It's in front of an unemployment agency that these Yellow Vests are calling for an 8th day of mobilization. They hope to rally job seekers to their cause.
The idea is that with enough support, we might be able to, well, topple this government and change the way politics are done in this country.
In a letter to police chiefs, the Interior Minister said pressure must be maintained until all Yellow Vest roadblocks are cleared. In Paris, shopkeepers are wary of fresh violence after already 8 weeks of protests.
Each Saturday, we play it by ear. When the protesters walk past, if we see that the crowd is getting too big, we close down the shop and wait for them to pass.
It's unsure just how many people will turn out for this Saturday's demonstration. Some who support the Yellow Vests could be galvanized into joining the protests after authorities on Wednesday arrested Éric Drouet, one of the movement's leaders. After his release, Drouet claimed he had in fact orchestrated his own arrest.
And that's what we were going for this week. We wanted to show the French people that we're not free.
While the movement appeared to lose steam over the holidays, Saturday's protest will be decisive in determining whether the Yellow Vests can regain momentum.
Now, in what could be one of the largest leaks in Germany's history, sensitive personal data belonging to hundreds of politicians and public figures has been published online. Chancellor Angela Merkel is among those affected, though officials have stressed no sensitive material from her office has been released. The Interior Ministry has said it's still unclear at this stage whether the breach was the result of a hack or a leak. Brian Quinn reports.
Home addresses, phone numbers, ID documents, and correspondence. The German government says private data stolen from hundreds of the country's politicians, celebrities, and journalists has been leaked to the internet. Germany's top cyber defense body met Friday to coordinate a response.
Authorities are working intensively to determine the extent and background of the incident and to provide assistance to those affected.
The information was published on Twitter in late December, but only came to light via German media Friday. The targets a wide swath of German political life, including representatives in the European Parliament, the Bundestag, and regional and local governments. 2 email addresses and a fax number used by Chancellor Angela Merkel were also reportedly published. The only major political party not targeted in the leak, the far right-wing Alternative for Deutschland, or AfD. Officials say they don't yet know the source of the leak, but Germany has become a prime target for hackers recently. Last year, the government said a well-coordinated cyber attack gained access to the foreign ministry's computer networks.
Everything data-driven that we develop in the coming years must be accompanied, at least as rapidly, by the development of data security technologies.
Security officials have blamed previous breaches on the Russian hacking group known as Fancy Bear, which experts say is connected to the Kremlin's military intelligence service, a charge Moscow denies. Local media report German authorities have asked the U.S. National Security Agency for help investigating the most recent incident.
Britain's Foreign Minister Jeremy Hunt has urged Russia not to use individuals as diplomatic pawns. The caution comes following Moscow's detention of the ex-US Marine and British passport holder Paul Whelan on espionage charges. Well, the 48-year-old was arrested on December 28th, but no details of his alleged activities have yet been released. Olivia Salazar-Winspear has the story.
Moscow's accused him of spying for America, but it transpires that Paul Whelan also holds British and Irish citizenship. The 48-year-old could face 20 years in prison if convicted. He's been held in solitary confinement at this high-security facility in Moscow since his arrest a week ago. He's denied the charges and his lawyers requested his release on bail. Irish authorities have tried to offer Whelan consular assistance without any success, as has the UK's Foreign Office, which expressed its concern.
The US are leading on this because he's a British and American citizen. But our position is very, very clear, which is a very straightforward point that individuals should not be used as pawns of diplomatic leverage. And we need to see what these charges are against him, understand whether there is a case or not. We are giving every support that we can.
A former US Marine, Whelan's a director of security for an auto parts manufacturer in Michigan. His family says he was visiting Moscow for the wedding of a friend at the Metropole Hotel, where he was arrested. According to a Russian news agency, Whelan was apprehended after receiving a USB stick with a list of all the employees of a classified security department. The case is the latest in a series of spying accusations which have strained ties between Moscow and foreign powers. In December, Russian national Maria Butina pleaded guilty to acting as an illegal foreign agent in the US. And in March, former double agents Sergei Skripal and his daughter were poisoned with nerve gas in Britain, which saw London pointing the finger at Moscow.
Prosecutors in the Netherlands have launched a criminal investigation after a container which fell from a cargo ship washed up on its shores. Dutch authorities also saying that the Swiss shipping liner MSC are liable for the cost of the cleanup. Sanam Chantier reports.
Soldiers and volunteers working side by side to clean up this beach in Schiermonnikoog, a Dutch island near the German border. This after a cargo ship sailing the North Sea lost hundreds of containers while battling a storm, one of the largest incidents of its kind in the region.
The powder was on the beach, but it's now spread across the dunes because of the wind. It needs to be removed.
There really is a lot of debris and we need help to clean all of it up. The tide keeps bringing in more rubbish, so we need all the help we can get.
According to authorities, the Swiss-owned ship was mostly carrying toys, furniture and car parts, but some of the containers were holding hazardous chemicals including lithium-ion batteries and organic peroxide, which can cause injury on contact with skin. Meanwhile, a criminal investigation has been launched by Dutch prosecutors who are holding Swiss shipping line MSC liable. At this stage, it's not clear if there would be lasting environmental damage to the area, which is a vast expanse of tidal flats and wetlands.
Foreign ministers from Latin America and Canada have said their governments will not recognise Nicolas Maduro as Venezuela's president when he's sworn in for a second term on January the 10th. It comes after the 14-member Lima group met in the Peruvian capital to discuss stepping up international pressure on Caracas. Peru's Foreign Minister Nestor Polizio saying that the group had delivered a strong political message. Now, Tropical Storm Pabuk lashed southern Thailand on Friday with heavy rain, wind and surging seawater. Airports are closed, ferry services have been suspended, leaving thousands of tourists stranded. Well, the storm has also caused power cuts, sent trees crashing into homes and flooded roads. Earlier we spoke to our correspondent Daniel Quinlan in Surat Thani.
Pabuk smashed into Thailand's southern coastline this afternoon, earlier than authorities had anticipated. The storm made landfall just below Surat Thani, the gateway to two of Thailand's most popular destinations, the islands of Koh Phangan and Koh Samui, which both remain cut off tonight from the mainland. The airport remains closed and ferries have been suspended. Just to the south, 30,000 residents have been evacuated. Authorities fear more downpours tonight, with flash flooding a distinct possibility. 12 provinces in the south are likely to be affected by the storm as it moves over into the Andaman Ocean.
And finally, Nissan's former chairman Carlos Ghosn is scheduled to appear in court next Tuesday for his first public appearance since his arrest last November. Ghosn's been rearrested twice over allegations he underreported his earning for years. He's now requested an open hearing with the Tokyo District Court.
What began as a 10-day stint in a Tokyo detention center has now stretched to 7 weeks. But on Tuesday, Carlos Ghosn will finally have his day in court. Lawyers for the ousted Nissan chief have employed a little-used section of the Japanese constitution to request an open hearing to force prosecutors to justify Ghosn's continued imprisonment. Since being arrested aboard his private jet on November 19th of last year, Ghosn has been locked up, unable to respond to the accusations of financial misconduct leveled against him. Those allegations multiplied as Tokyo prosecutors have added to the charges against him. He was first accused of underreporting his Nissan compensation by some $44 million over a 5-year period starting in 2010. On December 10th, prosecutors rearrested him on more charges of underreporting compensation during the past 3 years, extending his detention for another 22 days. On December 21st, prosecutors rearrested Ghosn yet again, this time on charges that he transferred losses on personal financial investments to Nissan's books. A new prolongation granted on New Year's Eve means he can now be held until January 11th. Ghosn has denied any wrongdoing. His treatment has brought international scrutiny onto Japan's criminal justice system, where it's common practice to keep suspects locked up until they confess, and to conduct interrogations without defense lawyers present.
You're very much up to date. More international headlines here for you on France 24 in 15 minutes' time. We hope you'll join us then.